What's going on, guys? Kigerr here, and today I'm going to give you my definitive Black Widow build for 1v1, group PvP, and PvE content. Let's get into it. Alright, we're going to start out with my Dimension Duel build. And remember, I'm going to focus on what everyone can do, not specifically what someone who has spent in the game can do with cards, badges, things like that. So looking at our skills right here, my first skill on my rotation is Trained Assassin Exploit Weakness. Really quick dash. This doesn't say it in the skill, but it is target off and it will break line of sight on most skills. The only thing that it won't break are those pre-register skills such as missiles, webs, and the photon stuff from Captain Marvel. Then I go into Trap Expert Sticky Bomb. This is great for this build because it's a set it and forget it kind of thing. You put it on them, it stays on them for 6 ticks. So if it's a Spider-Man and they have high dodge, each tick is a different chance to apply damage. So you can get 2 or 3 of them through the dodge chance, as well as 2 additional things here. One, you can throw it on a storm's bubble, and then once they go out of the bubble, they have to deal with the last 2 or 3 ticks, which is just free damage for you. Every time they bubble, you get a damage proc from Sticky Bomb. Second, we have a specialization, which we'll get into after the skills, that gives you damage if your opponent has a status effect. This applies a shock, which is a status effect. Next, we go into Explosive Expert Flare Gun. As you'll see with every single one of the 5 skills I have on this list, every skill moves Widow in some way. This flare gun is a backflip, which can be a dodge. So, like, let's say they put down Hulk on top of you, you can throw the flare gun, blinding the Hulk and the opponent, as well as backflipping you out of the taunt circle, allowing you to keep your DPS up while dodging their skills. Blind does go against status effect accuracy. They don't need to be guard broken for blind to work, but I've honestly never seen blind not hit. Then I honestly go between double shot or concentrated fire depending on the matchup. I actually go into Dimension Duel with 2 different build setups. I have the one you see right here in front of you, and a second where I swap the exploit weakness for quick step strike and double shot for concentrated fire. That is specifically for tankier targets such as Magic and Captain America, because they're really hard to hit, hard to take down. So those 2 skills in specific allow you to pile on the damage and stay on top of them. This build right here is good against everybody else because it keeps you moving. You're always moving, you're always clicking a skill, you're always doing something. Then we have Firearm Expert Frag Bullets. I almost never use the skill. I mostly stay with the first 3 skills are the ones I click all the time. The 4th skill, Double Shot, I use if they're on top of me after a dodge, things like that. And Frag Bullets is there as extra damage. So if they go to run away, dash away, whatnot, Frag Bullets has a actually decent range that you can click the skill from, that once they're a good distance away from you, even further than your auto attack or most of your skills, you can click Frag Bullet and it locks on the target and will follow them, dealing the damage while they're across the map. Now let's get into the specializations. So Widow specializations are so interesting because there's so many that are great here. If you don't have great PvP increase, going down here to Sharp Mind can be a very strong option. I personally always, no matter what the game mode is, use receiving intel for increased damage under 50% HP. This is great with her tag playstyle. You're going in for a tap, backing back out, go in for a tap, back out, and then once they're under half, you become a true assassin and go in there for the kill. Then we have up here the one I was telling you about before, Subdue. Increase damage to immobile targets or targets with status effects by 30%. She has one over here that I really like, Custom Tactics. Increase damage dealt to single target by 21%. This sounds really great in Dimension Duel, right? Wrong. Because you have magic that can have allies, you have strange that can make clones, you have several characters that can make multiple targets, and even if you're against, let's say, Captain America, which is a single target, if they have a Hulk, they're no longer single target, right? Because Hulk is now a target. So Custom Tactics has been booted out of the Dimension Duel lineup. I have this moved up here, improvising. It's here, it's usable. The issue is I'm clicking all my skills so often, this does not really help in any meaningful way. You'll actually see the 4 that I'm using right here. I am using the first 2 that were talked about. Right here, receiving intel for the damage under 50% HP, and subdue for damage if they have status effect. I'm also using disguise tactics to go invisible and then get that extra little hidden. And because of where my crit damage is, I am during my buff of the Magneto badge, which is a 14% buff, I am 342% crit damage. So I am using increased max crit damage by 50%. I would not recommend using this unless you can put your crit damage above 320. I think that's a good breakpoint to start getting the maximum benefit from this. If you're not able to do that, a good second option right here is Secret of Spy for the 18%. The wording's a little weird here, but it's 18% melee damage decrease. So the idea is you want to stay on top of your target and keep everything in melee range, which in the game files it says melee is 4 meters from the target. You can play around with the bear and Heldeheim in Dark Domain. He puts down a ring around him that is melee damage decrease, so that circle shows you what the 4 meters looks like in game, so you can really play with that. If for whatever reason you don't want to use this, a last thing to try out, which is I play around with this a little bit. I haven't maxed it out or nothing, but this is one of my favorite playstyles in the game, and that is Acrobat. This is not for the faint of heart, and if you make a tiny mistake, you're probably dead. So right here, you get dodge, gauge, recovery when you're under 30% HP, and the idea here, the reason why I don't have it maxed out is it's really hard because in order to play Acrobat to the highest level, you would need Disguise Tactics to be level 9, not level 10. Because it says 30% or below, but Disguise Tactics sometimes messes up and gives you 31%, 32%. So if Disguise Tactics is working properly, it says 30% or below. So Acrobat giving you more dodge rate lets you be more assassin-like in other games, right? Next, let's talk about Omega cards. So with Omega cards, this is what I'm currently running. I know it's all specials, not everyone's going to have that, but people have asked, what am I using? These are the cards I do in fact use. Let's talk about other options of what I would be using if I did not have specials for PvP. I'd be using set 2, the crit damage and cooldown cards. I've had some questions about this because of the Thanos badges. I think it's going to be tough to get all the Thanos badges in a spot to where you have all your cooldown where you want it for people who aren't spending. So I think this is a good crutch to let you into that game plan. Then set 6 can be good with Loki and Thor God of Thunder 2012 for the crit damage 2 set bonus. I personally would shy away from it and lean more towards set 5 for the Captain America Crossbones 2010 and Captain America 2004 for crit damage and defense pierce with 2 set attack bonus. Then, last but not least, depending on how your crit damage is doing, if you max out crit damage, ignore this. If not, then check this out. I like the idea of Captain America 2004 for crit rate and Future Imperfect 2015 for ultimate gauge recovery. So ultimate gauge recovery for Widow is actually important because if you get up to 200%, that puts your ultimate on a 16-second cooldown. So during the 90 seconds, you can get your ultimate off several times. And raising it by even the base, this is the max, 14.4%, that can be a breakpoint to make it go from 18 seconds to 16 seconds and really let you maneuver around the board. Because in a Widow against Widow matchup, you can't use her ultimate or many of her skills unless you have a target. So the first 2 ulti is probably going to be the winner, right? Next, let's go into companions. So with companions, there are a couple important ones to talk about. I like using Ultron. I almost exclusively use Ultron. In some matchups, I will swap in Icarus. If it's a Captain America, he's usually a tough matchup for me because of how tanky they are. But when I ultimate with Widow and then Icarus, he gets the damage boost from Widow, allowing him to eat through Captain America. So Ultron, Icarus, 2 other notable ones that are worth checking out is Daredevil for the anti-dodge, and obviously the big Jolly Green Giant, Hulk, to allow you to play around space. A lot of the top players are using Hulk. I personally don't because I feel as though if you're against something, why use it? So I have him on my board because he's 5-star and he gives me a HP boost, but I don't use him as an actual summon. Next, let's talk about stats, and then we'll move into tips and tricks for Widow and Dimension Duel. So as far as stat allocation, you play a very interesting game here. With the skills I gave you, your stamina usage isn't very high, so stamina recovery doesn't really have to be anything at all. I have 143%, and I have way more than enough for everything I do on auto, whatever game mode I do, no issues. Ultimate gauge recovery, you'll see mine is pretty low. I would like to have a lot more ultimate gauge, but I have just not been able to get it in any meaningful way in my badges, things like that. I would prefer having my ultimate gauge a lot higher. As I said before, the Widow who ults first probably wins. Crit rate and crit damage, those want to be pretty high. If you have to choose between the two, crit damage it takes the cake because when you use your ultimate, you are guaranteed that crit. But I think in PvP for all characters, defense pierce, cooldown, and PvP damage decrease are going to be your 3 most important stats. Widow specifically, you're going to want some ultimate gauge, crit rate, crit damage, and as I said, cooldown is also very important. There's going to be some matchups where guard damage decrease is decent. You will want PvP damage increase because that gives you a percent bonus. Remember that total damage and PvP damage decrease do the same thing, but you get far more PvP damage increase when you get a roll or stat of that than total damage. The hierarchy is crit damage gives you way more flat stat than anything else when you get a roll or core of that. Then most stats give you about the same range in the middle, and then there are a few stats down at the bottom, total damage being one of them, that only give you a small amount. Now, talking about tips and tricks with Widow and Dimension Duel. As I said, you want to save your ultimate. So what I like to do is play one of two playstyles, depending on who I'm up against, character-wise and player-wise, because Dimension Duel can be a lot of mental as well. So I like to do one of two ways. Either I charge straight forward, use my dash, run right at them, and then stay on top of them, forcing them to use abilities, memorizing their dodges, knowing what skills their character is capable of, and then staying in that 4 meter range so I can always have my melee damage decrease going, which I like to have pretty high, from my boots, from my specialization, things like that. You can even use the Urs companion, that will give you melee damage decrease. I am not currently doing that, but that is an option if you just want more melee damage decrease. Another thing to look for is use your dash when they're in animation. What I mean by dash is not your dodge, but the exploit weakness, where you dash right at them. So Strange, a lot of Strange players have been using the barrier curse, where he does a hand move from super far away and then does a beam at you that does a bunch of guard damage. He also does Rings of Ragador, where if he's right on top of you, he teleports backwards and does a red, orangish lightning at you. Whenever those animations start casting, you want to dash into them with your dash button, the run, and then exploit weakness on top of them. That will give you the exploit weakness damage onto them. It puts you in the melee range for damage decrease, and you also ignore the damage from those skills because you are off target when the attack is trying to hit you. Other examples of that is Captain America. When he does that initial run at you, you dash through him and run across the board. This is also really good with Hulk. Hulk dancing is something that I'm a big fan of. The opponent is running at you, you throw an AoE on top of them, be it blind or double shot, then you exploit weakness and then continue running. So you dash through them and then keep going to create space. If you're against someone like Magic or Captain America who's currently breaking your guard, the way to recover guard is to not take guard damage for X amount of time. I don't know that number, I'm sorry. I think it's 3 to 5 seconds. And then your guard will start recovering. So create space, recover guard, so you can dance and play again with your opponent. Next, let's get into group PvP. So moving on to group PvP, I have two main builds for you. I have this one right here, using several of the same skills. A couple got changed. Still using exploit weakness for the quick hit. Still using flare gun for the blind. Instead of the single target sticky bomb, we're using trap deluge. Big damage, big AoE. We're still using double shot, which is really good. If you want to go after single targets, then concentrated fire is a great option. This also allows you, these two are both really good against hulks. So concentrated fire, you can shoot through the hulk to a different target, or double shot, you can fan out, hitting the hulk and everything around. I also like to do the same trick with crystals. So when there's a group around you, I do this with Trap Deluge quite often. Ulti Trap Deluge using the crystal as a target, hitting everything around myself. Then the fifth spot is a flex slot. So there's going to be a... I personally use knee dive right here for damage and scaling up into the sky. Lets me stay up in the sky, do some battles up there. But the other option here is Firearm Expert Frag Bullets. As you see, it does a small AoE. Yeah, when we get into specializations in a second, this one has to be your fifth slot because of how the specialization works. Because we'll need 2 deadly aim skills, and there's only 2 deadly aim skills that we have. Now, the difference between this one and the other build, the only thing that changes is Trained Assassin changes to Quick Step Strike. So this is for the two different play styles. So quick step strike is for the people that like to go in the middle and scrap, actually fight, get in there in the combat, because it makes you untargetable. Has during that animation lets you get some cooldowns back, lets you keep doing your thing. Exploit weakness is more of the in and out, I want to defend the point leader or I am the point leader strategy. It's a quicker cooldown, lets you stick to the target, or if someone's coming after you, it lets you play around with them. As we talked about in Dimension Duel, if let's say Iron Man or Captain America are rushing at me, I can exploit weakness through them and then keep walking the other way. And then it has such a low cooldown that I can turn around and then do the same thing, and then we're playing this cat and mouse game until my ultimate's up, and then that's another juke that you have going on. So those are the two main skill builds. Now let's get into the specializations. So with the specializations, this is the one that I run right here. So melee damage decrease, crit damage cap, increased damage to someone immobile or status effect. This one gets even. Both of the last two get even better in group PvP, being Omega War or Alliance Omega War, because it doesn't have to be my status effect. It could be anyone. Burn from Iron Man, bleed from Captain America, things like that. And the yellow one, if they're under 50% HP, I do 25% more damage. That allows Trap Deluge to be a literal one hit. If they're under half health, you come in and you ult double shot, ult Trap Deluge, and you wipe a team. What you can do right here is if you want to be more offense and less defense, because this orange one right here is very defense focused. If you want to be more offense, less defense, then you can go into Firearms Operation Breakthrough for additional crit damage. This maxes out at 27.5%, which if you're at 300 and you're really just pushing the 300, this will put you at 327.5, and then with the purple Fatal Strike allowing you to have that 327.5. Now let's get into Omega cards. Now I still use the same cards for group PvP versus single target PvP. The one thing you can do is I have a lot of Defense Pierce as my exclusives, and I would not need that specifically for Alliance War and Alliance War if I know I have a Doctor Strange with a Defense Pierce buff. Now, if we take a look at the sets, I will give you exactly the same as the single target PvP situation. The only thing that changes really is set 13, the accuracy card gets a bump. It's decent in the 1v1 PvP because of Spider-Man, things like that, but in Omega War, it's been a strategy for a long time that some people that are lower power, what they like to do is stack dodge. So if they don't, sure you can one-shot them, but if you can't hit them, you can't one-shot them. So they like to use the dodge mechanic to get around that, and if you have an accuracy card, it will really help in that situation. Now let's talk about stats. Stats are going to be the same thing as single target PvP. The only thing that might change is, as I just said, you might want to go into dodge if you believe, because the idea for having dodge and group PvP is not everyone is using their accuracy card, not everyone is focused on, they're just throwing down skills hoping to get damage and kills, but if you have slightly higher dodge than most people, then you can skirt by a little bit than people might not recognize. So remember, you're going to want ultimate gauge recovery. I was saying how great that is, 16-second ultimate. And Dimension Duel, which is only a minute and a half, is ridiculous. Can you even imagine what that 16-second cooldown is like in Omega War or Alliance War, where 7 minutes are on the board? Last but not least, let's get into companions. So with companions, there's one thing you have to take into account. I want to see a lot of the same things as the Dimension Duel, which is Ultron's really good. Hulk obviously gets better in group PvP because it makes it 10v10 or 15v15, turns it into 20v20 and 30v30. If everyone has a Hulk, then it literally doubles the amount of playable characters on the board. But Daredevil gets better in the group aspect. Icarus actually loses some power. Like, he will kill someone, and they might not know it's targeting them because if there's 3 targets around you, all 3 of them have to wonder, am I the Icarus target? So Icarus gains some power there, but it also just kills one person, so it loses some value there. Now, if you're with your alliance, with Alliance War, some really interesting things you can look into are things like Athena Circe combo, Athena giving attack boost plus damage in the AoE, and Circe lowering their defense and dealing damage in AoE. A third one that follows that same idea right there is Vision, because Vision does damage in AoE and reduces incoming damage as the protective side of those. It's still really hard to give up 2 or 3 Hulks on a team just because that's extra targets. You mess with targeting. But assuming Hulk gets nerfed eventually or something shifts, going back to those 3 are things we'll think about. Now, I want to talk about tips and tricks for group PvP, and you have to decide when you're going into it, are you going to kill the target? Are you going to brawl, just go for mass kills? Or are you going to be the point leader where you'll get the crystals, kills where you can, and then dip out? So that's really the 3 main playstyles that Widow does really well. She's good at following a target and sticking on them. The exception would be if a flyer knows the specific ceiling areas that Widow literally can't get to. There's only a couple, but then the Widow will just shift and then go after the next highest target. She's also really good at brawling in the middle. As I said, going in there, double shot, trap deluge, can just clear a wave of people. Whereas she's also a really good point keeper, which is generally what I do with Ultron. And I just stay away from the fight, and I brawl in the middle at the beginning of the match. I stack up points, and then I back up, and then I play on my side of the field. And when I force them on my side of the field, that means I have allies to bottleneck in on them, and it doesn't matter if a group of 15 are coming at me. I'm able to dash through their hulks, run away. I'm able to ultimate, go invisible, and just wait 6 seconds. That's a long time in a 7-minute game. Last but not least, let's go into PvE. Alright, starting with skills in PvE, this is primarily going to be focused on the evasion and not the Alliance raid, because Alliance raid currently has several bugs in it right now, and I don't want to give you any tips and tricks going into Alliance raid as it is right now, and then have them fix it or change it in some way. That will be a separate video. So in the invasion or other PvE content in the game, this is the skill list that I recommend. We're still doing exploit weakness to dodge several of the boss's hits on the ground. Let's take Ares for example. He does that big AoE that if it hits you, it's probably going to kill you. Even if you were a massive whale, it's going to half health you. You can just ignore it, dash right through him, you're done. You're still DPSing, you're still doing your thing. Then we go on to explosive like effort, high explosive grenade, toss it, and they're now taking 20% bonus damage. and you have subdue, so you'll be doing 30% on top of that, just giving you more damage, more damage, more damage. Then Trap Expert, Trap Deluge. This will help you with the wave clearing aspect of the going into the invasion, as well as other PvE game modes, and especially in this invasion with Thanos and Ares. If you hit both of them, they both take the individual damage, which leads me into Concentrated Fire. You can do double shot, but you'll notice while you're used to using double shot and everything else, you'll notice if you're up against a Widow using Concentrated Fire, you'll be lower in the damage threshold because Concentrated Fire does do twice as much damage and the same action time. Last but not least, Sniper Shot. People will want to use frag bullets like normal, and you will see the same thing that I was just saying with double shot versus Concentrated Fire. You'll notice a severe DPS drop if you're not using Snipe. Snipe should not be used at all unless you're using it in conjunction with your ultimate. So the idea would be you throw high explosive grenades, and while you're in the animation of backflipping, you can cancel that animation and still get the damage off by activating your ultimate, go to the side, sniper shot, done. Next, let's get into specialization. With specializations, this is what I'm using right now. It's almost exactly the same as the previous one. The only thing that changed is I took out the melee damage decrease, which does work in PvE content, but PvE content is a lot easier to dodge, a lot easier to maneuver around, so I opt to go for additional crit damage, which allows me, with the Thanos buff, slot 2 buff, allows me to cap at 350 and really just stick it to them, do the damage. The only one that would be different here is once Alliance raid is fixed, right here, custom tactics will be very good on the single target things like Crow or Dormammu, because that's just an additional 21% damage going into it. Next, let's go into Omega cards. I don't focus very hard on PvE content, so these are the cards that I'm using right now. All of them have supervillain damage as the bonus stat, which puts me at 72% supervillain damage. If we're going to talk about sets, I still like the set 2 crit damage and cooldown, just because, as I've said previously, more damage, more cooldown. The cooldown allowing you, if you're the support character like Strange, you're getting buffs more often. If you're if you're the damage dealer, it allows you to keep the pressure on. If you're the defensive type character like Captain America or Magic, it allows you to provide the shields or summons to keep everything going. Then that puts us to set 4, which I really like. Set 4, 2 set of the 2 Nebula cards, Supervillain Damage and Supervillain Damage Decrease, with the 2 set of Stamina Recovery is really great for PvE content. If you can do the 4 set with the 2 MODOK cards, if you're worried about the waves leading into the invasion. I am personally not, but that is something you can go for. It'll also put you at 4 set ultimate gauge, so for Widow specifically, that can help. But you can mostly play around a lot of the aspects, and with Alliance Raid, it is only bosses, so having villain damage or villain damage decrease will not do anything. It is always worth mentioning set 6 for the Loki and attack card with the 2 set crit damage. Right now, set 5 gets a lot better because Alliance Raid, they seem to have a lot more defense than normal. So doing the defense, pierce, and crit damage 2 set works really decently. 2 more to talk about would be set 7 with supervillain damage and defense pierce for the same reason, and it's also a 2 set supervillain damage. Last but not least would be set 10, which I'm currently using for supervillain damage and crit damage with a 2-set attack. Next, let's get into, last but not least, stats. You're going to want supervillain damage. Depending on your playstyle, if you just want to AFK and just do it, supervillain damage decrease will help you a lot. And all PvE game modes, villain damage and villain damage decrease is specifically powerful in AFK training grounds, overnight farming, can be good in some invasions, uh, but it's a crutch. It'll help you out in some things, but it won't be as good as just focusing on the supervillain damage. Right now, there's an issue with Alliance Raid where it's not really considering everything as supervillains. So if that is still the case, then you want a percentage damage boost, which will be crit damage, total damage, and ground. Air versus ground, ground versus air, doesn't matter. Those don't really work for Widow because it's ground versus air, and there's no real air besides MODOK. And with air, you have to be a certain distance off the ground, which MODOK never is. So you never gain the surface versus air bonus. So primarily, you want crit damage, total damage, and that's really the numbers you want to go towards. Will give you the biggest bang for your buck with stats. Now, last but not least, tips and tricks for PvE. So with this Thanos specifically, you have one of two options with the Thanos raid and the Thanos invasion. You can either keep them together and just burn them down really, really fast, which is how you get the biggest numbers. But if you're a lower power player, the idea is Ares will chase a single target, and that target should take Ares away, and everyone else focus fires on the Thanos or groups up on the Ares. However you guys want to do it, it's tough to work with randos. I suggest focus whatever everyone else is focusing, and it's better for you as the knowledgeable player to be the one to hold Ares, because you don't want to put everything on an unknown variable, a different player having to hold Ares to himself. Let me know in the comment section down below if this Widow guide helped you, and if you're interested in Widow after this. Till next time, guys.